All right, what's up, guys? Happy Friday. Chuck and Nick here to bring you the Mav slate, I guess. Guess
Yeah.
Phoenix Suns slate a little bit. Mavericks are out. Luka Doncic, Kyrie Irving, and Derek Lively. So we'll get into that. Nurkic is out, which is going to present some value with Eubanks and or Metu. And then Jimmy Butler's out for the Heat. I think that's the major injury news that we have. Is there anything else?
Yeah, Melton for the Sixers and Pat Bev for the Sixers are questionable in that first game. I guess everyone's been trying to make Kelly Oubre a thing. If they're out, maybe he actually is today. But other than that, I think that's everything.
It's funny you mentioned Kelly Oubre because he was like chalk the other day, and like he was starting okay, but he was cheap. I think they priced him up a little bit, so I don't know that we're going to be too interested in him today either way.
Mhm.
6,100 DraftKings. I mean, 5,400 on FanDuel sounds good, but the main part of this slate that we're going to be interested in are the chalk Dallas Mavericks, and just look at these ownership percentages. Doesn't just I don't like it. Do you?
No, and I mean we have Ernst in chat already saying we need a better lineup than yesterday. Yesterday we were on all the Cavs, and
Hmm.
that did not go well. I mean, it was a no-brainer spot. You had to play that Cavs value, but I don't know that any of it really got to where it needed to. Merrill got hurt; he was terrible. Porter didn't hit a ceiling. Levert hit a floor game. Struess maybe hit value. It was just bad, bad, bad for the Cavs. So we're in a similar situation here with the Mavericks. Probably have to play them. Not the best matchup in terms of the defense they're facing, but yeah, man. I mean, I don't know. It's kind of unavoidable. I guess Seth Curry's still questionable. I'd feel better about some of these other pieces if he's out. I'm on FanDuel more tonight, so I'm probably not playing him much on there anyway at 5,200. But DK, I mean, he's over 50%.
Yeah, and in regards to yesterday, I mean, it's process over results, and it's not always going to work out. I mean,
Yeah,
if we ran that slate back 100 times, I don't think we would change much. So
right.
it's just a tough day. But with the Mavericks today, I mean, they're cheaper. Tim Hardaway is the only player. I mean, he's 6,100 and 6,300, but he's probably going to take 20 shots tonight, right? I know Jaden Hardy's going to be on the court. He has a very high usage with Kyrie and Luca out, but there's no one else in this game that's really going to try and I don't know, take over on offense, I guess. Like I like Derek Jones Jr. a lot, but he's not the type of player I think of to, get 15 plus shots up.
Yeah, I mean, after Hardy, I think it is Hardaway Jr. that you have to trust next. A very aggressive player on offense. And yeah, we've seen some ceiling games out of him with even just Kyrie out. So I do think he's one of the safer plays here. But yeah, man, after Hardy and Hardaway, it's kind of tough to trust these guys. I will say Jones is probably safe at his price. I'm probably going to have to play over 30 minutes. And then Grant Williams, I'm never really excited to get to him, but I think he makes sense here as well, especially on DK. Probably need a few of his threes to fall. But again, he was going to be scoring for this team. Not many guys on offense that are going to be super relevant. So I think he makes sense for sure.
And with Kyrie and Luca off the court, it's not a terribly large sample because there just hasn't been a lot of minutes when they're both not playing. But Tim Hardaway by far gets the biggest usage bump, and then followed by Jaden Hardy, smaller usage bump, and then I guess Derek Lively. Let me take Derek Lively out of here too. But I wanted to ask you about so we know the obvious plays, right? Jaden Hardy, Tim Hardaway, Derek Jones, and probably Grant Williams a little bit.
Mhm.
But how do we feel about let's start with the big men. I don't know if Prosper is really a big man, but Dwight Powell and Prosper. Prosper's pulling some ownership on DraftKings at the flat min. Dwight Powell looks like he's chalk on FanDuel. How hard should we be looking at these guys?
I hate Dwight Powell. I'm not going to play him. He was chalked the other night. I went to name as Kada over him in the $25, and that pivot made me like I don't know. It climbed the leaderboard in a big way. I don't know how this guy's ever chalk. Like I don't think he can ever get over 20 fantasy points. I'm saying this all now, and tonight he probably will because there's no one else available. But he really does nothing on offense. And I saw this video right before we logged on. I don't know if it was recent or what, but he's like jumping up and down in the hallway, and he hit his head on the ceiling. And they're like, he's not on the injury report, but I think the comment said like Powell questionable concussion. Not the brightest bulb, and just not the best fantasy producer really. So I don't know. I think what you do tonight is you pay down at guard, you pay down at forward, and then you have the two best centers in the league on this slate in Embiid and Joker. I think most builds are going to be paying up at center. We also have Drew Eubanks at center with no Nurkic. I think he makes a lot of sense. So I don't know. I'm fine just leaving the Mavericks front court alone. And yeah, I think you're limited to 4 on FanDuel, 5 on DK. I don't know that you need to even play 5 on DK, but on FanDuel, I'm pretty easily going Hardaway, Jones, Hardy, and then Williams probably over him. I would say Markeith Morris actually gives me, I don't know, I'm more interested in him at a little bit cheaper of a price than I am Dwight Powell, just because I at least know he'll probably take a few shots if he does see the floor.
Yeah, and the thing with like Markeith versus like Derek Jones is going to be on the court, so
I like
I think
Jones, yeah.
we play him either way. But like Markeith, he is a guy who, if he, they can give him the ball and he can go and try and create something, right? Where
Hmm.
some of these other guys, can. I mean, Grant Williams is great as a role player, but again, I've said it before, like he doesn't show too much of a usage increase, not enough to be significant. I mean, he's going to get more shots up, but and that's kind of reflected in the lower ownership versus everyone else. The 5% on FanDuel is somewhat appealing for Garrett Williams. And then
Yeah.
Rashawn Holmes. I mean, it sounds like Dwight Powell is kind of trying to take himself out of this disaster of a basketball game. But Rashawn Holmes, I mean, he's still only 3,400 and 4K, 0% ownership. Should we have any interest in him?
I mean, I feel similar to him as I do about Powell, but you're getting him a little cheaper and much lower ownership. So I think in like large field, high risk stuff, you can maybe get there. But again, I don't know that I want more than 4 Mavericks in a lineup, and I feel much better about the wings, much better about even Grant Williams than I do these bigs. And then on DK, you're going to have a decision to make. If Seth Curry's in, I mean, 3,700, he's tough to get away from. On FanDuel, he's a pretty easy fade for me, though. But again, there's not many ball handlers here.
Yeah, Gobbler in the chat, fade Seth Curry. Look what Sam Merrill did yesterday. I think it's a little bit different because Seth Curry does have some ball handling ability, where Sam Merrill, I'm just not sure. We're kind of really just depending on Sam Merrill to hit threes. We're depending on Seth Curry to hit threes as well. But at least he can pick up an assist here and there. But I will say, even though he's 3,700, he is the guy. Like, we're getting to Jaden Hardy first because we know he can take over a game. We're getting
Yeah.
to Tim Hardaway because he know he's probably going to shoot. He has to shoot 15 plus, if not 20 plus times.
Mhm.
And so if you are getting away from a Maverick, it should probably be Grant Williams or Seth Curry. But the 3,700 price tag, it is hard to get away from. And you mentioned Embiid and Jokic are pulling a ton of ownership today. So I imagine a lot of the field is going to be jamming in Dallas with one of those expensive big men. And
Mhm.
so if you're getting away from that build a little bit, you are finding a way to get I don't know. I don't want to say more unique lineup, but just it's a little bit different than what the rest of the field is going to be doing.
Yeah, absolutely. I think most of the field's going stars and scrubs today. I will say Joker and Embiid are lower owned on FanDuel than I thought they would be, both sub 15%, both pushing 30% or over 30% on DK, though. So, yeah, you're right. I think that's going to be the most common build. But I mean, there are pretty decent payups at forward with guys like Durant in that late game, Sabonis, if you consider him a forward, and then Bam with no Butler is paced up as well. So, even if you're not paying all the way up, I think kind of this higher mid range looks pretty solid here at center as well. So, yeah, you get a little different that way. Maybe just take a few less risks with some of this Mavericks chalk.
And Nico in the chat is fading the Mavs altogether crazy. Hate the matchup for him. So the problem is that someone has to play. Five of these guys have to be on the court, and it's surprisingly only an 8.5 point spread against Houston. I find that hard to believe, but the odds makers know more than I do.
Hmm.
And it's just, I mean, look at these minutes that we haven't projected for: 32 for Hardy, 35 for Hardaway, 33 Derek Jones, 32 Grant Williams. Even if it is like a wider spread and they're getting blown out, like what are they just going to run AJ Lawson, Prosper, Markieff Morris, or Sean Holmes the whole fourth quarter? And even without that, they're all so cheap that their prices are just completely incorrect given the usage that they're going to be expected to have tonight. And so if you want to fade the Mavs, I wouldn't fade everybody. I think Jaden Hardy, kind of similar to Craig Porter, except Jaden Hardy, like Craig Porter's, maybe he's not going to go out and score 20, but Jaden Hardy, like he's going to take shots, and we've seen his ability to have
Hmm.
huge games. And then same with Tim Hardaway, just like, and I do not like playing Tim Hardaway, but I mean, it's hard for him to fail in these spots tonight. So I think that you do have to play a couple of these guys. I wouldn't fade the whole team.
No, I totally agree. I mean, it is similar to last night. And even if you played all the Cavs, like your lineups with Porter were probably okay. I kind of feel similar about Hardy here. And then, yeah, Hardaway, I mean, he's going to be super aggressive. We've seen a lot of big ceiling games out of him. And yeah, I mean, I don't think he's going to kill you at the super high ownership. I think instead of fading them all together, like if we had better value, I'd be more on that side. But just play a little lighter because it's like 4 or 5 of these guys are chalk on both sides. If you have just 2 in your lineup, you already are going to be pretty different. You don't have to take as big of a risk getting away from the field.
And the difference kind of from Craig Porter too is we had a lot more. I guess we just had other guard value
Yeah,
options,
there's
you know,
Dunn. Yeah, there was a bunch.
and so there's just no one else at these prices that can give us the expected outcomes that we're looking for here. And so I did want to take a look at Houston since we're going to be stacking Dallas so hard, and it is expected to be a close game. I'm interested in Fred Van Vliet, and then Tari Eason's price is so expensive, and he's still pulling a little bit of ownership, but he's been fantastic. Are you looking at anyone else on the Rockets?
Yeah, I mean, if I can get to some Jabari Smith, I'd love to. I mean, it seems like he's really stepped his game up these past few weeks. Pretty inconsistent, but if this game's going to be close, I mean, he probably has one of the higher ceilings point per dollar. Van Fleet looks good here, a little bit cheaper than some of the other pay up guards. Fine with him. I mean, really, any of the starters, and then you mentioned Eason, I think he's okay. The one issue with Eason, at least in the past, is that it's rare we saw him go over 30 minutes. He actually played 33 his last time out, which I think is a career high for him. So definitely good to see that. So yeah, man, I don't think it's crazy. I just wonder like how heavy do I want to be on this game that is a 220 total where we have a few 240s and every other game on the slate's over 230. So it's like I think we need to eat some of the chalk, but I'm like, do I really want to run it back that aggressively? I don't know.
Yeah, that 30-minute barrier for Tari Eason is kind of huge. So even with this increased price, he also has
Yeah.
increased minutes. So
Mhm.
it's a huge thing. Maybe the field isn't paying attention to that. I agree on Jabari Smith. Looks awesome. Slow owned. I don't mind getting there. Jalen Green, never a guy I'm excited to, but even on DraftKings at 6,500, he's coming in 4% owned. Like he's a fine GPP
He's
play.
fine. Yeah. Yeah, I don't mind Green at all. Kind of scoring dependent. 61 over on FanDuel, but you could play him at point guard or shooting guard. Looks good over there. Yeah, I agree. I mean, if you don't want to pay all the way up for Van Fleet, there's a lot of good pay up guards or a few. I think you could fall on Green and still fit a couple of those pay ups into your lineups.
Hey, Matt Rogers, how we doing? British usually play soccer DFS. The American sports are so bloody hard. So many players on massive rosters, hard to keep up. For me, the biggest thing with NBA this year is there's infinite players in this league capable of putting up 40 to 50 fantasy points. That wasn't the case even just a couple of years ago. And
Hmm.
so just hitting these large field tournament winning lineups is so difficult. But we've talked about, if you're focusing a little bit more on smaller field stuff on both sites, you don't quite have to hit the perfect lineup. You can just play the good chalk and then mix in one or two of the under-owned tournament plays, and you can probably do pretty well.
Yeah, exactly. And I will say with NBA, news is like more than half the game. Like if you're not there to pivot as news breaks, even after lock, you're really playing from behind. So again, that's why it's valuable to have the model or keep an eye on news feeds on Twitter as things change. You have to be very, very fluid throughout the slate. Again, all the best players are late swapping, especially in those big contests. So if you can't keep up with the news, I know it's a Friday night, it's the holidays, it's tough for some people. Play lighter, or maybe don't play. And like I hate to say that because we want more people playing. It's better for DFS, but at the same time, I mean, NBA more than any other sport is constantly moving after lock.
And let's go ahead and move into the guards, just top guards. So a lot of the field is going to be playing value at guard, Jaden Hardy and Seth Curry, but at the top of the OF index, I mean, Steph Curry, Trey Young, De'Aaron Fox, Devin Booker, Fred Van Vliet, Tyler Harrow, Scotty Barnes. I mean, we have some good payups today. Who are the first guys that you're looking at here?
Yeah, it feels a little weird, but I'm very heavy on Tyler Hero today. I like the matchup against Atlanta. Miami's going to be paced up, pretty soft defense to deal with on the other end. And no Jimmy Butler for him. Our boy Jaime Jaquez hasn't had a good game really since Hero's been back. Even with Butler out, we see Hero really absorbing all that usage. I think that's a trend that's going to continue at least for the foreseeable future. You're getting a bit of a discount on him off the other top OF index plays. So I'm going to be heavy on Tyler Hero today, and he's not as popular as I thought he'd be. I think it's the price. People don't want to pay that for him. But again, great matchup against Atlanta, considerably paced up, and no Jimmy Butler definitely helps his upside as well.
Yeah, I was interested in Tyler Harrow too, even with that price. So it's pretty good to see his ownership, at least on DraftKings, is under
Mhm.
10%. And then the other guys above him, like these are all just tournament plays. I think that Fred VanVleet's pretty good at 8,200 on DraftKings. He probably deserves to be priced up a little bit. He had two monster games in a row, if I'm not mistaken. And against Dallas, like Jaden Hardy,
Yeah.
not exactly a plus defender. And he's pretty consistent at hitting, just the 5x value that we're usually looking for. I mean, he played huge minutes in the last two games. And so if this game is close, he's probably not going to play 45 minutes, but the 8,200 price tag feels like a little bit of a discount there. And then Devin Booker against Sacramento. Always interested in studs playing against Sacramento. It's a paced up game. I mean, 244.5 total. And along the same lines, De'Aaron Fox is in that high total game as well. Don't mind getting to either of those. I
Mhm.
actually didn't even notice that the Golden State Washington total is 248. Golden State's 12-point favorites, but Klay Thompson's finally starting to step it up. We'll see where he ends up on value. But Steph Curry, not a bad tournament play ever at under 10%, 9,600 on DraftKings, 8,800 on FanDuel. I mean, he hasn't been hitting this, but he's still cheap for what we historically expect from Steph Curry, what he was putting up at the beginning of the season, especially if I don't know if pods being out really reduces his usage or like anything like that.
Yeah.
But we'll see how that goes. And then I wanted to mention Scotty Barnes on the other side of this Philadelphia game. The field's going to be very interested in Embiid. I'm very interested in Embiid. We'll get to him on centers, but Scotty Barnes seems like a really good run back at 8,800 on DraftKings, under 10% ownership as well.
Yeah, I guess in my head I never think of him as a guard, but I totally agree. Definitely a nice upside play there. And again, the price is heavy, which is going to keep his ownership down. But if you are running something back with Embiid, I mean, who better than their best player? Um, Two guys I just want to touch on real quick. You went through most of the payups. I do think Trey Young's probably like the safest bet of that group to get over 50 fantasy points. I don't know how valuable you rate that. Like, that's kind of a weird thing to say, but I don't know. Like in cash games, if you can't afford one pay up at guard, I actually do think Trey Young is probably safer than Steph, Booker, Fox, Hero, and Van Fleet. As kind of strange as that sounds, just because he has been consistently over 50 points. And then the other one I like is actually Jamal Murray against Brooklyn here. A little bit inconsistent. He's resting on back to backs, which think is keeping his price more reasonable than maybe it should be. 7,300 on DK feels too cheap for him. Sub 8K over on FanDuel. Again, a lot of people are going to want to go to Jokic. There's probably some leverage there to go to Murray instead. And yeah, 3% on FanDuel. A little bit too cheap in a pretty decent matchup against my Nets.
And then Matt Rogers. So if you're asleep after lock, honestly, I probably just wouldn't even play, because if something happens later that you just can't take advantage of it, I kind of think you're just leaving expected value on the table.
Yeah,
Late
you could
swap is
play the.
essential.
Yeah, I was gonna say there are slates where you could just play the early games like at lock, like just the 7 o'clock games. There's turbo slates, things like that. So just make sure you're playing what you can keep your advantage in. Like, or just go to bed once all your guys are locked, or I don't know. You have to like the early games to play the main slate, something like that. But you're really, really handicapping yourself. So yeah, I'm not saying don't play DFS, but maybe change the type of games you're playing. You probably don't want to play the main slates that are going for 6 hours if you're going to be asleep for four of them.
Yeah, and DraftKings tried with the short slate last night, so maybe that helps a little bit. The last game only started an hour after lock. Yeah, I mean, if it's a buck or two for fun, and you
Yeah.
recognize that, that's cool. But again, I would probably try and focus on the smaller field tournaments. The first place is going to be smaller, but your chance of winning is also going to be much higher.
Hmm.
And then with loads of Dallas guys out, do we play a low value guy from there because he'll get some usage? Is that the idea? Yeah, it's just, Luca is one of the highest usage players in the NBA. He's off the court. Like, that's just so many more shots to go around. The ball's going to be in different guys' hands. And then along the lines of this next question, how do we know who's good chalk? I mean, if you're looking at the model, Jaden Hardy is very obviously good chalk today. He is predicted for absolutely insane ownership. But when you sort by DK value on the guards anyway, his like points per dollar, this is what this is, DK value, FD value, it's just so much higher than the next guy on the slate.
Hmm.
And so that's a pretty good way to tell. And then along those lines, like, where is Seth Curry? Is way down here, and so he's still good value even though he's very cheap. The model is saying he's not as good of a points per dollar value projected for 26 minutes. And so I would say Jaden Hardy is better chalk than Seth Curry, not to say that Seth Curry is bad chalk.
Yeah, no, that's a good way to do it. You could also just pull up the team and sort by OF index, just see their overall rating as far as raw points go. And if someone's really popular that's rating really low, maybe that's going to be a bad chalk piece. I'm guessing Dwight Powell probably fits that mold today. Someone who's going to be very high owned with a low OF index rating.
And BioIF, I mean, Jaden Hardy, 4,300. You can kind of tell he's sandwiched in between a bunch of guys that are just a lot more expensive than him, and he's 4,300 DraftKings, even the 4,900 on FanDuel. Everyone around him is more expensive, and so that's another good way to tell too. Um, I'll get to feel like Sabonis could eat with Nurkic out for Phoenix tonight. High total, high pace game. Yeah, we'll get to him when we get to centers. It's just tough because paying for Sabonis, like we can pay up for Embiid or Jokic, but he's probably going to show up as a good tournament play still anyway. In terms of value, I mean, Steph Curry, second in value on both sites, even at his expensive price tag. Like the high total game, we should be interested in Steph Curry. Kelly Oubre showing up for FanDuel, Kevin Werder, Kyle Lowry. Your Tyler Harrow shout, especially over on FanDuel, is showing up pretty high. What other value guards should we be looking at? On DraftKings, at least we can play a few of them.
Yeah, I don't feel great about this one, but I do think Lowry is going to be appealing here at least a little bit. Kind of priced similarly to a lot of that Dallas chalk. Again, they're playing Atlanta. He's coming off a game where I don't know. I think it was a blowout. Something happened where he only played, let's see, 17 minutes. Prior to that, he played back-to-back games over 30, where he's hitting value. But he's coming off this game where he had a terrible floor game, only played 17 minutes. So I don't think anyone wants to go to him today. I think he's a logical pivot off some of the chalk. Do I feel great about it? No. But again, we're just looking for leverage here. So he's one that stands out to me. Tyus Jones on FanDuel, don't love it, but probably a little cheap for his upside. And then one, I think, I don't know. Another one I don't feel great about is Malik Monk. In that late game against Phoenix, he's been coming off the bench. I think he's reasonably priced. Could see plenty of usage here in a high-paced environment. So I do like Lowry. Don't love him. And then I guess Monk, maybe a little Tyus Jones is like mid-range value type guards. But yeah, it's tough to get really excited about any of these names.
And then KT, Hardy, or Lowry, same price on FanDuel. So
Hardy.
they do play different positions, and we can just play both of them. If their FanDuel values were relatively close, I would say that most of the time I would prefer the guy who's lower owned, which in this case is by far Lowry. But when the FanDuel value score is so much different,
Yeah.
Lowry 13.7, Jaden Hardy 17.2, and keep in mind these numbers by themselves don't mean much. You have to always look at in the context of that specific slate. It just even though Hardy's 79% owned, we can find other parts of our lineup to get different. So I would not recommend fading Hardy tonight especially for Kyle Lowry, but you can play them both together.
Yeah, exactly. And when I said Lowry's kind of pivot off of Dallas chalk, I meant pretty much everything but Hardy, essentially. Like, if you don't want to get as much Curry, I really like THJ, but if you don't want to get as much Curry, or who else do we have here? I don't know. I don't mind Grant Williams, but some of the other pieces, I mean, Hardy's one piece of chalk I think is good tonight, but I think Lowry allows you to maybe get away from some of the rest of the Dallas chalk, if that makes sense.
And then Courtney in the chat, what if a player is low owned but high on the model value? And so we see this frequently. I'm going to adjust the slider to call it at 5,400. Like Jaden Hardy projected for all the ownership, and then we have Grayson Allen, Kevin Werder, even AJ Lawson, Kyle Lowry. Like these guys are all projected for much lower ownership than Jaden Hardy. But in this case, like Jaden Hardy's value score is also significantly higher than them, and so I think you play all the Jaden Hardy, and then as for these low owned guys, I mean, if you agree with the model, you just get a little bit over the field. I don't think there's ever, because there's so many times when a guy shows up near the top of value and they'll be under 5% owned, and very rarely do I think it's a good spot to just go all in on a guy or go really crazy on a guy. But I think it is valuable to mix these guys in more than the field does anyway.
Yeah, I agree. I'll say this though: just be careful with these guys like Lawson who are 3K flat, because they're usually going to have good value scores just because they're very cheap and there's not other good value on the slate. So for a play like that, I mean, there is a little bit of nuance, but if a guy is a little more expensive and he's falling into that category, usually they're a pretty good play. But just be careful of those mid price guys, because sometimes it's just I don't know context of the slate. There's not other minimum price guys that we're really considering. So someone like Lawson's going to shoot to the top.
And especially with Lawson specifically, we don't have enough of a sample with Luka and Kyrie out with these specific guys in the game to know reliably what his minutes are. And it could be a situation where if he's playing poorly, he just won't get that next rotation. Or if he's playing well, maybe Jason Kidd runs him out a few more minutes. And so we do have him projected for 19 minutes about, but that's very volatile. And we don't sit there every morning and just say, yeah, I think this guy's going to play this many minutes, whatever. We get our stuff, our minutes projections anyway from a third party provider, and they're usually pretty good. But it just, compared to guys like Kevin Werder, Grayson Allen, Kyle Lowry, we just have so much less information to work with when coming up with a minutes projection for Lawson.
Mhm.
If an important guy starts, is it preferable to have a guy start versus a guy come off the bench? Most of the time, I say we prefer the guy starting just because if they're in the game from the beginning, they have a better chance to play more minutes. Now, if they're playing next to other star players on the team who are still in, they're probably going to have slightly less usage versus if they came off the bench, but the greater minutes usually cancels it out. Do you have a
Yeah,
better answer, Nick?
no, just to kind of expand on what you've already said, I mean, yes, it's good, but I don't always think it's necessary. There's definitely guys that are kind of exception to that rule. Malik Monk being one, he's going for sixth man of the year. Like back in the day, Lou Williams was kind of in this role. Like he would never ever start, but he'd be a good piece to include in lineups because he's cheap and he's not sharing usage with those starters. And another thing you got to remember too, the five guys who start aren't always the five guys who finish. It's almost more important to see who's closing games out at times to figure out who's going to get those minutes. So what matters more than who's starting is minutes played per night. And if it's going to be a close game, you should be able to project their minutes fairly accurately. The one risk you run in playing guys off the bench is if a game does blow out, usually they miss their whole kind of second half run. But in games that are close, I don't think it's as important that they're starting as much as it's important that they're playing over 30 minutes. And then if they're in the closing lineup, that's usually beneficial as well. One way to check that is this site called Popcorn Machine. I think it's .com. It might be .net. I have it in my bookmarks, but you can click game flows there, .net, and you can see who's in the closing lineup for each game. And yeah, we're not projecting minutes here at Occupy, but I do try to keep an eye on who's in the closing lineups because, again, the starters are going to draw more ownership most of the time, but there are situations where the guys who aren't the ones finishing. And again, minutes over everything. Starting definitely helps, but at the same time, it's not always the guys playing the most minutes.
And to touch on that, like if a guy closes and gets an extra 5 minutes, if it's beyond the projected minutes, like a lot of times, if I adjust a guy by 5 minutes, that's enough for him to go from being in very few of my lineups to almost all of them. And so those closing minutes are most of the time very valuable. And then transitioning into forwards, Lewis in the chat, can we touch on the late Q tag on Hunter and what value can open up? So the thing with Hunter specifically is that we haven't really seen someone like this team. They're all kind of priced appropriately. No one's so cheap that they open up with Hunter out. I think we saw one of the Matthews or both of the Matthews kind of start in one of those games, but it's just so much usage is already being taken up by Trae Young, DeJounte, even Sadiq Bey that we're not terribly interested in anyone else. I mean, Sadiq Bey, sure, he's going to get maybe 1% or 2 more usage, but he's still playing with Trae Young and DeJounte, and his price is kind of hefty, and so I don't think necessarily Sadiq Bey is going to get any kind of increased production there. And then you asked about Okongwu. I just with Okongwu, we've seen them more willing to play him alongside Capella, which is great for both of their values. And so maybe he gets a slight boost. And his price on DraftKings 55 and 5,900, like it's not terrible. What do you think, Nick?
Yeah, no, I agree. I think Okongwu's okay. Again, center's probably the most loaded position tonight, though, so it's tough for me to want to go there. But yeah, if Hunter's out, it's going to boost all the starters slightly. So like all the Falcons, the Hawks are going to look a little bit better. And then Bogdan off the bench is going to look solid. If Bogdan were to slide into the starting lineup, he's going to have more secure minutes, so he'd probably be in line for the biggest boost. But again, they're all kind of priced up right now for whatever reason. But yeah, I mean, if Hunter's out, I'll just feel a little bit better about all the other Hawks. The starters, and then Okongwu and Bogdan if he comes off the bench. Really not going to be all that interested in either Matthews. I know they're going to have some upside. They're just too inconsistent for me to want to play on a slate this size.
And this is like maybe this is a little bit too galaxy brain, but DeAndre Hunter's a plus defender, and so I actually think it's more of a benefit to someone on the Miami side if
Yeah.
Hunter ends up being out. Like DeJounte probably guards Tyler Harrow, and maybe Hunter playing defense versus whoever playing defense on like Duncan Robinson doesn't really matter. But the point is, I don't think it's like a player like DeAndre Hunter. I don't think it's that much of a benefit to anybody else when all their prices are kind of already there.
Yeah.
So to get back to forwards, top of the forward list: Kevin Durant, Scotty Barnes, Kyle Kuzma, Pascal Siakam, and Mikal Bridges. We don't really have much in terms of stud power power forwards or small forwards today. So how should we be approaching this position?
Yeah, I mean, if we're talking chalk first, I think Hardaway Jr. is kind of your no-brainer here. Sites where Jones is forward eligible, I think he makes sense as well. If you can afford him, Durant does look fine. I mean, he's consistently pushing 50 fantasy points. This is the type of matchup you can kind of expect that in. And again, maybe he sees a few more rebounds with Nurkic out tonight. Not something I'm usually ever banking on, but he's affordable. So I do like Durant. Again, he's really the one pay up I think you could always trust here. Barnes looks good, low ownership. But yeah, I mean, as far as like starting your lineups goes, I think it's those two guys for Dallas, Hardaway Jones, and then if you can fit Durant, love it. It's just going to be tough if you're paying up at center as well.
I want to mention Kyle Kuzma too. I mean, he's showing up pretty close to the top. And keep in mind that forward is just kind of a weaker position today at the top. But Kyle Kuzma in a gigantic total game, 248 in that Golden State game. The 8,600 price on DraftKings is kind of uncomfortable, but we do have all the value to fit him in. The 8K price on FanDuel seems slightly too cheap. Which is reflected in that 18% ownership. So I like taking some shots on him. We've mentioned Mikal Bridges under 8K is probably a little bit too cheap. Cam Thomas is back in the lineup, taking up some more usage. So I get that. And then Klay Thompson, our boy, showing up back near the top of the model. He's been, I don't know, he kind of snapped out of his funk. It's been a few games and he's playing very well.
Yeah, I had a good night the other night. Pods got hurt, which was part of it, but everyone played Pods. I played Clay for a little bit more, and he had a really nice game. I mean, Clay's shots falling again, which is good to see. The price is up, but the ownership's down, so I'm totally all over Clay here. Really good matchup against Washington. I guess there's some blowout risk. You'd think maybe this game would be competitive though with Draymond out. We didn't get to talk about the Jordan Poole revenge narrative yet, but yeah, I don't know. I'm pretty. I don't ever want to play Jordan Poole. I'm mostly joking when I say that. But yeah, it is an interesting situation there. So I don't know. I like Clay. I think around 7K. Probably priced where he should be, though. It's not like you're going to get a ton more upside than where he is. One guy I did want to bring up was Michael Porter Jr., 6,300 on both sites. Again, I do like this matchup for the wow, I can't say teams that I got too much NFL on my mind, but yeah, for the Nuggets, I like Porter here. Again, just a thin position. I think he's a little bit too cheap, even with Aaron Gordon back. He has seen plenty of usage, and yeah, I think the matchup's better for him than maybe it is for some of the other wings. But I don't know. Not a play I'm crazy about. Just someone I think I'm fine landing on, which is more than I could say for a lot.
And something relating to what we were talking about earlier with good chalk versus bad chalk. Tim Hardaway isn't necessarily bad chalk, but the model is saying, especially even if when we're sorting by value, there's a lot of guys that are better points per dollar plays than Tim Hardaway. Like the model has Kelly Oubre above him, and I hate to disagree with the model, but I do disagree with that. And I don't know if there's just other guys like, so if there is a guy on Dallas that you want to like, Jaden Hardy is very clearly a play by the model, by us, like our feelings, whatever. But I mean, Tim Hardaway is kind of just, he's lower on the model than I would expect. So it is a smaller sample size. The model has less data to work with. So I don't think you should take this as, oh, we shouldn't play Tim Hardaway today because the model thinks he's a mid option. We haven't predicted for 35 minutes. And like I said, he's going to take 15 to 20 shots. So,
Mm-hmm.
and just some other mid-range guys like Derek Jones Jr. shows up great in the model. Under 40% ownership seems good. I think, did you mention Grayson Allen? We were talking about him before the show, I think.
With guards, I think I brought him up. I
Okay.
don't mind him here. Or no, it was before the show. If Okogie's out, I'll feel better because I am landing on him. Again, it's a tough position tonight, especially in the mid range. He's someone I'm landing on who's actually been hitting value fairly consistently. Again, good matchup. A little bit inconsistent, but at that price, I don't mind him at all.
KD still showing up near the top of value. Another good sign that we should play him. Like it's not hard
Oh
to fit
yeah,
him in today. And then Jaime Jaquez with no Jimmy Butler, even with Tyler Harrow back, is showing up as the top of value on both sites. Ownership
yeah.
is
No, go ahead. Yeah, if he's not that popular, I like him. It's just I thought he'd be pretty popular here. I think he was more popular earlier in the day. And again, I think it's a situation of they're kind of developing chemistry for most of the year. Hawkins was coming off the bench behind Jimmy, getting plenty of usage. We were playing him almost every single slate. And now that he's sliding to the starting lineup next to Hero, he really isn't the same offensive player, at least not yet. Maybe that chemistry develops moving forward. Wouldn't want to play him in lineups with Hero. I think if Hawkins has a good day, my big Tyler Hero stance not going to really pay off so well. So I think you go one or the other. But at 9% on DK, I like him. 31% on FanDuel. I think he's a little bit overowned.
Yeah, the 5,600 price tag is appealing, but it's just kind of like we're already playing probably a lot of the Dallas Mavericks, and if we're playing other guys that are super chalk, Denny Avdia 24% on FanDuel, 5,500. It's a good price, but it's kind of weird. It's just our lineups are going to be so similar to everyone else, and if you're playing small field like we were recommending, then it's fine. But in the larger field contests, I think we just find a couple other spots to get different.
Yeah.
How many of these Dallas guys are too many? Would we go up to five? And so, in theory, because they're all so cheap, five should be okay on a 6 game slate on DraftKings. But today, I really don't want to. A lot of my lineups have three, and then I have some lineups with four. And then I was getting lineups that had five Dallas Mavericks, but I kind of tempered that down. I'm not sure if I'm going to have much there.
Yeah, I mean they limit you to four on FanDuel, which I like, so I don't have to think that hard about it. I'll say this: if Curry's in, I think you could get to five on DK, just because he's so cheap. I wouldn't mind playing Hardy, Hardaway, Jones, Williams, Curry. But if Curry's out, I'm having trouble getting to a fifth guy because if I'm playing those first four, I'm expecting big things out of them. That means you're probably not getting ceiling games out of someone like Lawson or Morris or one of these secondary guys that are tough to get excited about. And again, I don't like Dwight Powell. I don't care. I'm making that my stand today.
And if you are playing five, like I said, in theory, because they're so cheap, it's fine. But if you're adding in like KD and Embiid and then some other guy projected for decent ownership, then it's probably going to be a dupe lineup, which
Hmm.
isn't the worst thing in the world, I guess. But just keep that in mind.
Yeah, it's not ideal.
And I wanted to see if we had any other mid-range forwards. I think that probably stick to the guys that we've already mentioned, and we should be all right.
Yeah, I mean, I could use this as a transition here. Eubanks has power forward eligibility on FanDuel. I think he's going to be one of the most popular forwards on the slate. We had a question: can you play him at center? I'd say just play him at forward because we have so many good centers tonight. And DK, obviously, you could play two centers, but I think one of my favorite forward plays really shouldn't be a surprise is going to be Eubanks here. Just because, again, he's probably starting at center, even if it's Metu. I mean, I don't know. I think they could start Metu alongside Eubanks. Honestly, I think we've seen that before with Nurkic out. I don't know. We got to wait and see. The Nasir Little thing, the Akogi thing, they shouldn't matter too much, but they actually do. But as long as Eubanks is starting, he's probably one of your best forward plays on FanDuel. Period.
Yeah, on FanDuel, they both have power forward eligibility, which is great. It's tough for me to want to play cheap centers on FanDuel, especially on a slate where Embiid and Jokic are expected to be popular. It's just, yeah,
Yeah.
Eubanks could put up a good fantasy score, and if you nail every other position goes off. Like you can beat a 60 plus fantasy point night from Embiid or Jokic. But it's just there's other centers on the slate tonight besides those two that can put up big scores. Sabonis, Adebayo, Sengun.
Hmm.
Like Siakam's only power forward eligible, but yeah, just play these guys into power forward spot is what I would recommend. Especially we didn't see that many power forwards we're super interested in anyway. So Eubanks and Dwight Powell, I would say try to avoid playing them at center unless somehow you build the rest of your lineup in a way that you like what you have and it's unavoidable.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And again, I think this is the third time I said it, so he's probably going to have a career night. I am not
Yeah.
playing any Dwight Powell tonight. I don't care if he starts. I don't care if he has his bobblehead night and they retire his jersey. I'm not touching him.
I mean, DraftKings 4,400 sorting by
He's gonna look good in
value.
every model, and he did the other day too. He does all the time with Lively out. It's just he is just not a fantasy producer for me. I don't know. And again, maybe it comes back to bite me, but like honestly, like what are the odds of Dwight Powell really ruining my night? I don't know. It
I
seems.
will say the best night I've ever had in DFS was 2 seasons ago when I pivoted to a 1% owned Dwight Powell, and some other cheap guy was the chalk. But that's
Oh
happened
man!
once in 3 seasons. So
And he was
still,
super
I think,
low. He was super
yeah,
low on that night.
yeah.
So yeah, there you go.
And just looking at him versus Drew Eubanks, they're the same price on both sites, and Drew Eubanks just projects out so much better in the model, even though he's higher owned on both sites. It just kind of like the Jaden Hardy thing. I think you're thinking too much if you're trying to pivot away from him, and you just
Mhm.
play Drew Eubanks, assuming that he's starting. If you trust the model, and then find other spots to get different. And then, like, Dwight Powell really isn't showing up that high. I mean, 4,400. We have Kevon Looney super low owned. Now his minutes have been weird. They're going against Washington. We like big men against Washington. But we only have Kevon Looney projected for 18 minutes, and he's still showing up this high on the model. So that's pretty interesting to me. They did say that they're interested in playing Trace Jackson Davis. And I'm glad I remembered that because I wanted to mention this. We have projected for 13 minutes. I think he has the potential to play more than 13 minutes, and I'm not sure much of the field is going to catch on to this. He's probably unplayable on FanDuel at 61, but the 4,600 on DraftKings, I'm honestly surprised he's even pulling 5% ownership. But it's a guy to keep in mind, maybe for a turbo slate or the showdown or something. But I have a feeling that Trace Jackson Davis is going to start showing up as more chalk as the games go on.
Yeah, and I will say this: if Pods is out, that's a really, really good play everywhere. T. Jackson Davis, Kerr really likes him, which is kind of rare for Kerr and young players. He's looked really good. We obviously saw that he had two huge games back to back. And again, if Podzemski's out, that is going to secure minutes for him. Wiggins is questionable as well, so there are scenarios where maybe things open up in that late game and you could get to him. I'm trying to see if there's any direct pivot. I don't know that there is. But yeah, I mean, maybe you have Grayson Allen or something like that in your lineup. You could switch over to Jackson Davis if we get word that those two guys are out for Golden State. And I'm really, really going to like his upside at his price. So definitely
He
something to keep an eye on.
he closed an overtime game that Golden State needed to win, so that alone is pretty significant. He balled out too.
Yeah, yeah.
And then Metal Alloy, yeah, we didn't mention Siakam at forward, but underpriced. He's always going to be a good tournament play, and so I guess we preferred the other guys. That's why we didn't say him by name, but
Yeah,
I think he's fine.
Siakam's good. Totally
Yeah.
agree.
Who do we like if Seth Curry doesn't play? I mean, I don't think that there's another guy on Dallas that's going to step up. Like we mentioned, AJ Lawson at the flat minimum price, but I think it just play Jaden Hardy, play probably Derek Jones Jr. and Tim Hardaway, and it's probably just a little bit more usage for them, maybe.
Yeah, for me, it's pretty simple. Like, I'm already going to be playing a ton of Hardy and Hardaway and a decent amount of Jones and Williams. If Curry's out, I'll probably just up my exposure to Jones and Williams.
And then we had a question about Sabonis in the chat earlier, and I want to say like Jokic and Embiid are just so easy to get to. And I was talking about this with someone earlier. Like Embiid, the field is finally over 30% on Embiid. Watch him fail when it's like he's just 11,200 on DraftKings makes zero sense to me. It's so
That's
dumb.
insane.
Did they reduce his price by like $1,000? Like, what are we even doing here? And we have more than enough value to get to him or Jokic. Now, Jokic has been awful lately. The model still has Jokic barely over Embiid today. But I don't know. Like I prefer Embiid. I say that and watch Jokic is finally gonna be good, but he's been different with Jamal Murray back in the lineup, and so
You nailed it. I was just going to say that. He's a different player without Murray. I mean, his biggest games, his biggest seasons came when Murray was banged up. And we're seeing this new Embiid with no Harden in the lineup, and I think that's the difference there. Before the Sixers had Harden, they had Simmons, who's obviously not some big offensive player, but the offense was running through him a lot of the time. So we're seeing this new Embiid with the highest usage rate of his career. Jokic's is down a bit with Murray in the lineup, and I think that's why we're seeing kind of that changing of the guard when it comes to like the best play in fantasy DFS because Jokic is still up there. It's just Embiid has grown to be the more consistent one.
and I mean, it's reflected slightly in the ownership, but a lot of the time I was playing more Jokic over Embiid, and tonight I'm going to flip that. I'm going to play more Embiid than Jokic. That's why I say like it's not going to work out for me, but hopefully it does. And then Sabonis right behind him. I mean, he's significantly cheaper on both sites, coming in for less ownership, especially with the power forward eligibility on FanDuel. Maybe we want to fit in a mid-range center. Like Clint Capella is expensive, but he's also been a different player lately. His usage has been different. Like I said, they're playing him alongside a Kongwu. Gafford has been phenomenal, which I don't know, shouldn't really be surprising, but just him being able to stay on the court, stay out of foul trouble is huge. And then I want to mention Pirtle and Nick Claxton. Like we have a lot of good mid range options today.
Yeah, and you could throw Capella into that group as well. I know we already talked about Okongwu, but Capella's been really solid lately. Rare situation where we don't talk much about Sengun. What better matchup than against Dwight Powell in this beat up Dallas front court? I mean, we already like Van Fleet here, but who's to say it's not going to be a Sengun game at pretty low ownership? Center is the most loaded position on the slate tonight. So again, if you are playing Eubanks, I think you play him at power forward on FanDuel as much as you can. You can play the two centers over on DK, and it's all the more reason to fade someone like Dwight Powell, in my opinion, who has a very, very low floor, and that's like the 10th time I'm saying it. But yeah, man, it's just one of the better center slates we've seen in a while. And it's not a huge slate. What is it, 6 games?
Yeah, 6 game slate. It's nice, the sweet spot.
Really nice spot. So yeah, I'm definitely going to be mixing up my center exposures. But Embiid's my favorite. I'm pretty comfortable saying that, but it would be foolish not to mix in some of these other guys.
And with Sengun, like his price is good, the ownership is in check, and he's been losing minutes recently. I'm not quite sure why. I feel like he didn't play the fourth quarter against Atlanta, or maybe he only played a couple minutes, but like we're used to seeing him, 35, 34, 37, 43, and recent games like 27, 30, 31, 24. And so he's going to have a big minute game again. And I'd rather chase that when he's lower owned versus when, the whole field is getting there. Maybe if his price starts to come down a little bit more, but he's going to be a great tournament play as well.
Mhm.
We just got news, I guess it looks like Beverly and Melton are out. And so let's take a quick look at the Sixers before we jump into our dummy build.
Yep.
I'm not even quite sure who this helps because these guys, Joel Embiid and Tyrese Maxey, already take up so much usage anyway. Like who? I'm
It,
trying to think what their starting lineup's going to be.
Yeah, so Covington's in tonight.
Oh, it's
He's been
here.
out, which is going to kind of balance this out a little bit. But like I said, going into the show, I think everyone wants Oubre to be a thing. He might actually be a thing now with these other guys out. One other guy, I guess, to keep an eye on might be Springer. He's so cheap, talented player, but yeah, not someone I'm really like rushing to. But yeah, I think more than anything, it's kind of like the Hawks with Hunter. It's like these guys that are out aren't super high usage players, but you're going to feel better about playing the starters. Maybe Tobias Harris is another guy who gets a nice boost here. But yeah, we already loved Embiid. Maxey obviously had upside, but it probably secures both minutes and usage for Oubre and Harris.
So I did just see the starting lineup for the Sixers. Batum was already out. Marcus Morris starting, and
Okay.
but yeah, I wanted to
I
mention
mean,
Tobias. Oh, sorry. I just wanted real quick. Wanted to mention Tobias Harris. He's been awful. That's not going to continue forever.
no, certainly not.
But
Yeah, I
Morris,
mean, I have some interest in Morris. Again, when he gets minutes, he's a guy who likes to shoot, even more so than his twin there. So I don't know. I mean, if you're looking for value, I'm curious what the model's going to show. I imagine he actually scores pretty well in terms of value on both sides. But I guess we'll just wait and see what the model produces. But I don't think it's crazy to play Morris in a game where maybe he gets close to 30 minutes.
I mean, he played 25 in the previous game after being right around this 12 to 16 mark. Played 28 a couple of weeks ago, and so if he was mint price, I imagine he would be another one of those like chalk value pieces. He's 3,900 and 4,100, so his ownership isn't going to come up too much. But he is going to pull a little bit of ownership. But just playing next to Embiid, it's so hard for him to find like any usage. Embiid is the highest usage player probably in NBA history right now.
Yep.
And then, yeah, Kelly Oubre is going to look better. I'm interested to see what that ownership pops up. It's not going to refresh before the stream ends, but that's why you should sign up for the Occupy site. $7 a week gets you access to the model, gets you access to the plugs for NFL, other sports. So it's a pretty good thing to have in your back pocket. But let's go ahead and build a quick dummy build. And I think that we should just start with Jaden Hardy. I'm going to put him in at the. Should we start with Hardy and Hardaway?
Yeah, let's get both of them in there. I think that makes sense.
And then do we want to add Derek Jones to this, or do we want to wait and see?
We can add him. He's my third Dallas player for sure. I like that, Derek
All
Jones.
right, so this is probably going to be a very common combo tonight, but
Hmm.
I think we found enough low-owned guys that it doesn't matter. Do we want to plug in Embiid? We both mentioned we love him tonight.
Yeah, let's get him in there.
Embiid and Scotty Barnes a little bit too much to add in right now.
I think he might be. What do we have? We only have 5,700 per. Yeah,
Leaves us
maybe we have to wait on
47.
Barnes.
Let's hold on Barnes. Let's take a look at Phoenix.
Yeah, I don't
Metu
mind.
has power forward eligibility.
Yeah, let's say this. I mean, Eubanks, if he starts, is going to be safer, but they've been starting Metu a lot. I saw someone mention that in the chat as well.
Mhm.
So I think we go with Metu here.
Let's put in Metu, another value piece. And regarding that late swap stuff, like if the whole world thinks Eubanks is starting right now, and we get news at 5:30 that
It's Metu.
Metu's starting, he's still gonna pull ownership, but he's gonna be lower owned, where he's gonna be under owned, and Eubanks is gonna be over owned. And so that's one thing with late swap. Like it's not gonna be super significant. Like Metu's not gonna come in 5% owned or anything, but it's still just such an advantage to be
Oh
able to
yeah.
make that change.
Hmm. It is good to see Metu does have power forward eligibility on both sides tonight as well. I think that's worth mentioning.
And then who's one of your other like top plays maybe that's a little bit more expensive?
I brought up Hero early on.
Let's do it.
Yeah, fit him.
Tyler Hero leaves us 5,600 per position. Just going to take a look at what power forwards maybe we're showing up in value. DK value. Jaime Jaquez, Michael Porter Jr., Kaminga. I don't know if he was here a few minutes ago. Maybe we missed him.
Uh, don't mind Kaminga.
Yeah, with Wiggins questionable.
I mean, I like Porter best out of that group. He's not the cheapest. I don't know what that's going to leave us
6,300.
with, but
Let's put him in. He's a pretty good tournament play, and then gives us 4,900 for utility. Yeah, it's kind of gross down here, but
I mean, we're going to have Eubanks. I
yeah,
don't
we'll
know if you
have
want to play with Meadow or your boy Jackson Davis.
Trace Jackson Davis, Grant Williams. We have a few options. Would say like Porter Jr. is the UP play, but this is a pretty solid. This is a pretty solid core here. I think maybe take out Harrow just for now, but like Embiid is the clear pay up today. We have the 3 Dallas guys, and then Metu, who we both expect to start for Phoenix, probably comes in under owned. Leaves you 6,500 per position, so it's a lot to work with.
Absolutely.
Do you have any final words before we get out of here? We have about 22 minutes to lock.
No, I'm gonna go get building. Again, just keep an eye on the news, especially on this holiday weekend. I mean, a lot of people are doing things with family, coming and going, shopping, etc. But yeah, just the big advantage in NBA to this day is still late swap, and as long as they're allowing us to late swap, you got to stay on that. So definitely, just recommend if you can late swapping as much as possible where it's obviously needed. I mean, don't just do it to do it, but yeah, sorry, I'm thinking as I'm talking now, but you're good. Good night, everyone. Thank you.
I appreciate you guys for watching. We'll see you tomorrow. We're off Christmas Eve, no NBA games, and then I think we're going to bring you a Christmas video. It's just a matter of if it's the night before or the day of. So stay tuned for that, and we'll see you guys.